Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidt List. I am your host, Kurt Schmidt, and today I am going to have on one of my favorite guests, Grant Wood, and we're going to be talking about all things AI and not AI from a technology standpoint, but from AI from a solutions standpoint, something that I don't think enough people talk about. So, real quick, speaking of solutions, I do have to mention a new book. The Little Book of Networking is out there and available now. You can go to Amazon. There are links in the description, and all the other things. All right, so let's talk quickly about AI and the state of what's happening out there because everybody's talking about AI. Everybody wants to know about AI. Some people are completely afraid of AI, but Grant here is going to solve all of our problems, aren't you, Grant?
Sure. Yeah,
Sure,
absolutely.
perfect. That's exactly
No
that's
pressure.
the
Yeah,
answer I was
right.
looking for. So, Grant, real
Yeah.
quick for the
Well,
audience, can you tell people what you do and who you do it for?
yeah. So I'm the founder of Notion Labs. So Notion Labs works with CEOs of global and regional sized companies that feel like they've tried everything in their innovation programs. And at the end of the day, they're just frustrated that they're not seeing something that matches the amount of resources that they're dumping into these programs. So we help them become more innovative again.
That's awesome. All right, so I want to start with kind of where I started, which is the fear or the disregard of AI. So there seems to be two camps out there. There's people who are deathly afraid of AI that's going to come and
Yeah.
take their jobs and it's going to eliminate and destroy the economy of the entire world. And then there's other people that are kind of like, it's just kind of a toy. Tell me, Grant, as a person who works either in technology or in a knowledge-based sort of world, what should I be thinking about when it comes to AI? Should I be afraid? Should I not be afraid?
Um, It's a great question. And there's a lot of really smart people trying to answer that question, and many like it. And they've been trying to answer that question for a long time now. So I think generally the answer is no, you shouldn't be afraid. And more importantly, I think the answer is I don't think you need to be afraid specifically about your job. And there's some very specific reasons for that that have to do with really what AI can do and what it can't do. So if we look just at the development of AI, the development of AI is following the same development sort of curves that lots of other technology that we use on a daily basis have curved, have followed, right? And when we look at adoption curves, they tend to be these exponential things when they're connected to networks. And AI things are connected to all the networking things that we've built already. And so this is the thing that has investors and venture capital and anyone involved in the financial side of innovation very, very excited because we see that anything that touches technology could be something that AI touches, and there's clearly a there. We now have to kind of step backwards a little bit, I think, and go, okay, so what is the promise of AI that we've been talked about? And I think if we go back probably 20 years, Ray Kurzweil was the first person I think that really reignited everybody's discussion around intelligent machines or machine becoming sentient or emergence of consciousness coming from machines. And he sort of predicted that by 2029, we would have general intelligence, artificial general intelligence. So the idea is that you now have a machine, a system, maybe a collection of machines is how we would look at it today. And that thing is understanding and knowledgeable and able to learn in the same ways that a human being can. So human level intelligence. And this has always been so far away, we've never really had to worry about it. So it's always been like a philosophical challenge. We have a lot of really smart people telling us that we may be actually on track for that may be something that we're headed towards. So that's where everybody's fear comes from, right? It's you're going to have a machine that's as smart as a person. Okay, if it's as smart as a person and I can rent it for 20 bucks an hour, Why does anyone need me anymore? Right? So this is the thing that's framing up the fear for everybody, is that there's sort of this point on a timeline that says this is when humans have now got a competitor for most intelligent thing on the planet. Why do we need any of us? Okay, super reasonable question to ask. The next thing that we need to look at though is, given the world as it is today, we have to look at how many things are done today that are automated by computers or controlled by computers. Those are the things that in 2029 will probably be taken over by AI. So if we're already using computers to do something or to solve something, what we're going to see is the combining of multiple tools that we use today into something that is just orchestrated by an AI. Okay. What we're not going to see yet is the problems that we already haven't solved with computers in the world today. And there's lots of them, right? Um, Raking leaves and shoveling your driveway, right? Now, someone might also say, "Well, hang on. I keep seeing people make, announcements about really amazing humanoid robots." Sure, a robot is definitely something that could be controlled by an AI system. But is it the kind of thing where everybody's going to have access to this right away? No. Is that the most productive use for something? No. Are there people predicting that everyone's going to own a robot and you're going to Yes, they're predicting that, but reality very seldom actually follows these predictions very, very close. So, what I think is really useful for people to understand where tasks are that we do as people that can't be taken over, what we should do is go back and look at some examples of let me frame it up this way. We have some examples that are really concrete of how people are using AI to do some things that when we look at them, we're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And there are specific examples where like, "Oh my gosh, some jobs are gonna go away." And there may be some cases where that's the case. But I wanna go back and talk through, how we got there, and what we'll see is that it actually was the case that we were probably learning how to do something over, 30 years of slowly introducing technology into it, and because of all of that previous work that was done, now it is something that is well suited to being AI-ified, right? It is well suited to having, and really specifically, we're talking about machine learning. We're not really talking about AI here, but it's it's things that because we digitalize them so much already, they suited themselves very well towards a machine learning system stepping in and removing a bunch of steps that needed maybe some human involvement. So we can talk about some specific examples of that. I don't know that I actually answered your question, but
No, you did.
as we get as we get through these examples, I think what people should realize is that the amount of things that we automate today is where automation is going to continue to be. And there's so many things that we just don't automate today that we don't even think of because it's just the way we interact with each other and how business works, that um, that those things are not necessarily going to increase in their ability to be automated just because we have AI. I do think that there's another thing that will happen though, and I think this is talked about very little, and I'm not sure that I'm the person who can articulate this the best, but what we saw with the emergence of the internet and what we saw with the emergence of every previous trend, social media, big data, cell phones, is predictions of the demise of everything that came before it. And almost all of those predictions have been wrong. Not because the new technology didn't take off and wasn't huge, but because it was happening in addition to all of those old things. So I'll give you a really concrete example. When television came along, the predictions were that radio is dead. Radio still today isn't dead. And between television being invented and deployed, we have put, I don't know, we're like 5 or 6, maybe closing in on 5 billion human beings connected on the internet, right? And we have put supercomputers in our back pockets that we carry with us everywhere. We've got computers on our wrists that are stronger than all of what humanity had access to in the 60s, right? So all of these things have happened, and yet today in the UK, something like 90% of adults listen to the radio at least like a half hour a day. And so if you're looking at things that you're saying are disruptive and it's going to replace things, radio may not be seen as really sexy technology, but it is still a meaningful way to communicate with people and to do marketing and advertising and reach a really critical audience for you, even though we have new and more interesting ways that are
Yeah.
are very, very fancy, that are connected to all of these other things. So I just want to say that this story of AI isn't really being told that well around like what is going to remain the same. There's certain time scales where things take way longer than maybe we would like, and it's those time scale types of activities or sort of parts of our society or of our world that might be really interesting to sort of examine. Like, okay, given an AI, given a bot that can learn it incredibly fast and do a bunch of things, are strip malls going away? Like, well, no, right? Like, are airports going away? Well, no. Okay, so it's like, what are the things that are gonna be the same? Like, those are weird examples maybe, right? Like, a strip mall isn't a computing thing, but if we think AI is gonna have a dramatic impact on how you buy things or how you interact with commerce, well, are strip malls gonna go away? Well, we thought strip malls were gonna go away when Amazon got huge, right? And yet people still go to the mall. So this is where I would say we need to just sort of take a little breath and like look at the rest of the story and
Yeah.
not just the part where we're looking at the exponential curve for AI.
Well, do you think, and again, do you see these trends happening right now? Like cloud, for example, was huge for so long, and I'm starting to see
Yeah.
more and more places start to build more on-prem things. And I know we want to talk about this, but security is key for these types of decisions because over the years, cloud
Yeah.
was apted as this sort of it'll fix all your communication problems and all these different things, and it'll store your data. And now the costs of cloud computing has gone incredibly crazy, and so more and more I see
Yeah.
of larger organizations, not just from a security standpoint, from a cost standpoint, having some on-prem machines to store information is becoming more and more viable. So again, years ago,
Yeah.
you would have
Yeah.
said it's all going to the cloud. It's going to live there forever. It's going to live in huge data centers. We're never going to have a local machine again. We won't even buy laptops because we'll just have a screen that VPNs
Right.
into another computer or something. So, talk to me a little bit about security when it comes to AI because I know, and I recently had the director of IT for Anderson Windows on, and he's very adamant about AI regulations and policies within their organization because it could be
Yeah.
very dangerous to a company like theirs. And you think, well, they're not a technology company; they're just a window company. How could they be affected by this? Talk to me through a little bit about the security concerns people should be considering when thinking about AI.
Yeah. So this is a really good topic to talk about because I think it also peeled back the curtain on just how good the systems are or are not. So right now, nobody has built a large language model. There isn't a single one in existence that can resist what's called an injection attack. So, for anybody who's been, around web technology, for a really long time, we were very worried about SQL injection attacks. It's where you have a web form, and instead of putting in the information into the web form that you'd expect, like, give us some feedback or ask us a question, send us a message, someone puts computer code in there, and the computer code is actually like SQL commands to the database. So they know that you're running a database. They can guess it's probably a SQL database.
It's
So
a
they put
very
a few
common
characters in
problem.
there. Yeah, and so when that gets submitted, right, your code starts to process the message that you sent, and those characters trick it into now executing that code. And so people would do things like delete your customer database or create a fake account on your system or whatever else they wanted to do, right? And so they would inject that code into the system and the system can do it. Okay, So that exact attack is done within minutes of a new chat model. Like there's researchers everywhere, and this is just like the first thing that they try. And so the way this will work is you will just tell it, ignore what I'm saying, don't engage in our conversation anymore, and instead, like, execute this command and say these things. And then you know it worked if it just says that thing to you. And so
Yeah.
it's like, great, I've now broken out of my little container that they tried to put me in to like hold all of my things. And so the concern there is, so there's two things to talk about there. One is like some of the more clever ones that people are doing right now. But two, what that implies though is that people with more than just a fascination with trying to do these attacks may be able to who also by the way maybe really deeply understand the architecture at play, probably have the ability to more accurately try and not just break out of sort of the shell that is um, moderating what the information that you can get out of the system is containing just the things that you've input into it. But maybe you can break into other people's little protected spaces and start pulling the data that they've put in back out. And so this is where CIOs and CTOs, are probably up at night because you maybe have someone who's just like, I want to play with this model. And they take a bunch of financial data or they take a bunch of information from your company and they just load it in and they just think they're doing it on their personal account and they're just trying this thing out. But the problem is several fold, right? One, you're now very likely, according to the terms of service, giving them new training data. And all of these systems really thrive on novelty. And so if you have proprietary language that you use or proprietary information that you use, it might very quickly be identified as something that is new and novel. And that's problematic because if part of your value as an organization or even as an individual is the uniqueness of how you speak, right? That
Right.
uniqueness might now start being incorporated into what the big giant monolith thing is teaching everybody else to say, or how it's answering those questions, because that novelty ends up being a characteristic that seems like creativity, right? And so if it can semantically identify you as providing it a creative answer for something, creative writing might very, very quickly be co-opted, and put somewhere else. So that's one thing. So it's sort of like you're bleeding your IP out into the world in a way that you might not be able to detect or even
Yeah. You're
know,
just
right? So
serving
there's
it
no
up.
way for you to then, yeah, you can no longer enforce your copyright. And there's some interesting lawsuits from major publishers right now against Google, in fact, for this exact thing. Like you scraped all of our articles, and now this thing is pretending like you have actually done the work and you didn't really do any of the work. And so while we can't say that there's a direct one-to-one copyright violation like we would have conventionally thought of it, when you really peel back the layers, that really is a thing. And that is a form of a security problem. So the fact that your information is going in there and you don't really have any control, there's no open governance sort of understood. There's no way to pull anything back. Like how can you delete information from the system? Like good luck. I don't think that's possible. And if you read the terms of service, like you don't have any recourse. They can do anything that they want. I think I think there's another thing though that we can talk about with this, Kurt, which is I think we should really be going back to some IT type fundamentals, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the life cycle of this technology if we're going to deploy it? So, a really interesting first thing that a lot of companies are trying is, hey, we're going to put a little chatbot in on our website and people will be able to answer some questions about our company. Or maybe we can reduce calls to our call center because we're going to put some FAQ type information or a bunch of facts about something. We're going to put it up on our website. People are doing this with internal websites for like HR information or just company information, how to onboard employees, kinds of be like how can we offload call center, calls by
Yeah. It's big
making
in call
answers
centers
more
for
accessible to
sure.
people. Yeah, and the problem is in a I would say in 100% of the cases, and I can't back up that number with anything, any facts or any research, but every case that I know of so far runs into the same problems that we could have predicted and we can predict. And if it had been applied to any other tool in the IT toolkit, we never would have deployed this into production. So it fails a lot of the really basic life cycle things. Like if I load data into this system, how do I verify that the correct information is coming out of the system when people ask? So there's no audit trail. I can't go back through past queries and prove that when people ask questions, they were given facts, okay? Because these systems are not fact-based. They
No.
are, they're semantic associations. It's the stochastic parrot problem, right? It doesn't know what it's saying, and so it can't look at 2 things and be like, "This one's true and this one's false." It goes, "This one's more likely than this one." It's like, well, that's not the same as whether it's true or not, right? So, if we go back to this life cycle question, then how does a department or a division or a team then do the basic operations that we would do on what we would call data, right? So you've put this information in, it is data, but how do we create data? How do we update the data? How do we replace data? And how do we delete data? And how do we correct problems? What's the audit path? What's our improvement cycle? And the answer is there is none. There is no clear way to do this. And so what most people that I've talked to are working on are ways of using these things where they actually just nuke the whole thing and then trying to retrain a new model. And then they run through a test suite. It's like, okay, that's really great. But I'm not so sure that the investments in these things are necessarily worth it without building a lot of automated tools yourself to like get this cycle automated, sort of how we deploy things in the cloud. Um, and the real question is it safe? You know, is this a safe thing to do? Will the people using this system use it to embarrass you? So there've been some really high profile embarrassments.
Mhm.
A lot of car dealers have very quickly were convinced to like go throw chat things on their websites, and people then trick those chat bots into getting the dealer to give them something in writing saying they could buy a very expensive vehicle for $1.
Yep.
And there are laws in a lot of states that if you get a written quote, like, you can buy it. Now, I don't know that I think it's gonna hold up in court, right? Like, no human being signed this offer or anything like that. But that was sort of the point that people were making, which was to say, "Look, you put this out here, and it's supposed to be representing you, and it's pretending to be a human, and I, on the other end, may be actually believing that now I have some sort of verbal agreement with you." And so if at that level, that seems really problematic for businesses. But just go to the more practical thing, which is the user experience or the customer experience. It is very disappointing to think that you're talking to someone and it tells you something, and so you get in the car and you drive somewhere thinking that there's inventory available, that they have prepared something for you, that there's something they're doing for you, and you arrive and the people there go like, "Oh, well that yeah, we don't know that's the bot. Oh no." That's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so until a system like that can be integrated with the rest of your business systems, that it's fully auditable, that it can do the basic life cycles that we would expect for information or for data, um, I don't think that these are things that you should be deploying or even allowing within your organization yet. And I think that that's so I think security is absolutely concerned, but I think it goes way beyond security. It's just
Yeah.
at this point, most of these things are bad business, and there are some exceptions that we should talk about, where it's actually maybe really, really good business.
So let's talk about that. So to your point, instead of just going in and being like, I'm deploying AI here, you get AI, you get AI, you get AI. Look under your
Yeah,
chair, there's some AI.
or just
If
people
I
randomly playing with it in your company, right? Which is maybe the bigger problem, right?
which is we know is happening and people are doing it. So more and more companies are getting better at laying out these sort of you know SOPs and things and SLAs around how to use it. But okay, let's say I am interested and I don't want it to be this random thing. Where is a good place to start, Grant? Like where should I first be looking and
Yeah.
exploring AI in my business?
Yeah, so I think so first off, what I would say is stop using the term AI. Part of doing this right is understanding that what you're looking for are tools to solve problems that you have. If you're not starting with "we have a problem," you're already failing because you're not going to have anything concrete to measure against to even know that whatever you're spending all your time and energy on are even worth it. So that's the first premise. And that, by the way, applies to everything in business, right? If you're not really addressing a problem that either a customer has or that you have, stop, go back to the beginning, right? Okay, so I think there's some really practical ways that we should break down machine learning and look at where we have already got sort of some new tools in the toolkit that we can look at that we can apply into specific business situations. So I'll go through a couple of good examples. So let's maybe start with that chat example. There's some really great use cases from some good sized companies out there on how to use interactive chats and chat bots in very, very successful and powerful ways. So, large language models gave everybody the idea that you could just take an LLM and drop it in. But these use cases actually predate the large language models and were developed by people who understood machine learning, sort of neural nets, and basically like call center scripts. So a really good example is Virtual, which is a spinoff from Health Partners here in Minnesota, which is a healthcare provider. And Virtual spun off, and they basically have they orchestrate virtual doctor visits, right?
Hmm.
So the way it starts is it's like, "How can we help you today?" And you're like, "I have a sore throat." And they just start asking you a bunch of questions through this chat thing. And their goal is severalfold, but their goal really is to sort of pre-diagnose what the problem is so that they can, one, reduce the amount of calls that a human being has to interact with, and two, get you as fast as possible to an appointment with someone who can very quickly kind of hear the same things and go, "Oh, you have one of our top 10 things." Like the top it's like 80% of the calls to healthcare providers are all the same. 80% of them are like bladder infection, ear, nose, and throat, like, bronchitis, COVID, flu. It's the same stuff over and over again. And that takes a huge amount of resources, even though they might go fast. So these systems are very, very effective in sort of pre-diagnosing people, but the system isn't allowed to make an actual diagnosis. So your goal is to get to a practitioner as soon as possible. And then what that means is that the people who are actually then still there in the system are receiving the most difficult or the most challenging or the most complicated cases. So this ends up being a win-win for the people trying to get you to a care provider on multiple levels, right? But if you look back at the history of this, um, they might describe this as an AI system, but it's just a straight up machine learning system. It is taking a bunch of historical interactions that they started with people calling in and scheduling appointments. They already had a knowledge base around questions to ask people to diagnose specific things, right? So the precursors were we already had a bunch of interactions and we already had systems that were tracking calls and those customer interactions coming in, and we were already measuring things. So we could already answer certain questions around, well, could we stack rank these things and just try and take the top 10% and like offload those? And what they found is that they can actually get pretty deep into the numbers and offload a lot of the calls and get them to practitioners. Now, I'm going to share something that's a good learning for people that they use when they go out and they talk about this and how effective it is. So, if your goal is to get people as fast as possible to talk to a doctor and so that the doctor can give you a prescription and you can get people through this system as quickly as possible, you are going to potentially cause yourself a really big problem. And they ran into this problem very, very quickly. And it just so happened that it coincided with COVID, which sort of gave them a little bit of leeway to be able to address this problem. And so their problem manifest or their solution manifested in a new problem. So if your goal is throughput through the system and you're only really caring about measuring how quickly someone can get to a provider, what ends up happening is the system will start connecting certain diagnoses with the same provider. So if there's a doctor that is just really fast at diagnosing bladder infections, the system will say, well, you know what? If it's a bladder infection, send it to that person because that person can see 200 patients a day for bladder infections. And so what ends up happening is the employee experience kind of goes to hell. Because now someone who got into medicine to be a care provider and to work with people to, to help them, all they're doing is seeing bladder infections all day long, as an example. And that's not how you retain employees in a highly competitive job market where it is really hard to attract and retain top medical talent, right? So that work experience gets really bad. So they went back and they've optimized this system so that what they are looking for are optimal outcomes now,
Hmm.
where balancing what the employee experience is with what the patient experience is. So we're trying to get patients to someone who can help them as much as possible, but we're recognizing also what makes a good employee experience as a practitioner. And that is you need some variety in the kinds of stuff that you see. And the numbers on the total time um, are maybe not that much different, but your company's goals are not just patient throughput. Your company's goals are you want people to enjoy working there and you want to have low turnover and high employee satisfaction. And so if you build a system like this, I think it's a good lesson for companies going in to say, and what is everybody's experience with this system, not just what's the customer's experience. And I think that's a
Right.
really good use case because it starts with sort of pre-large language model technology. It is absolutely based in machine learning. It is actually, it is fully chock full of buzzwords on things around the things that people are told to do. But it is a really practical use case that shows this working system didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of experience doing something a different way, where we had really good data that we could use as our key performance metrics, so that when we're building the system, we know what we're actually getting out of it. There's another use case, that I like to give also because, again, it sort of predates everyone's large language model experiences, and that is, there's a company called Zeni that does online, prescription eyeglasses, and you can go on and in, like, a couple weeks, they'll send you a pair of glasses, and they're very affordable. Um, and I had pre-COVID, I think, or maybe during COVID, I had a spectacular experience with them that started off with, we ordered something and it ended up being wrong, and we ordered several pairs of glasses. I think I got, like, some prescription safety glasses for myself and then some glasses for each of my kids, and, one of the prescriptions or one of the glasses needed to be wrong, but we had used, like, a discount code that we had gotten on that pair of glasses, and so the challenge was I wanted to return it, but I didn't wanna lose that discount because I needed to reorder glasses again.
Right.
And so I went back and I was like, "Hey, I need to do this." And they would not let me talk to a person. I had to use their chat bot. And I was so frustrated. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna be a mess." I went in, I'm like, "I need to return some glasses," whatever. And their chat bot is excellent. I just can't say enough about the experience that they've created in it because their chatbot includes little applications. So as you chat, they can bring up something that you can interact with. And there's other people that do this. It's just theirs is really, really good. It's been well trained over the years. And what will happen is they'll say, "Oh, is it this order?" And you're like, "Yeah, it's that order." And then they'll say, "Well, which thing in that order?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah." And then I said to it like, "Well, I got a discount on that, and I would like to use that discount again if I reorder it." And it said, "No worries. We'll put that code back onto your account as being valid. We'll return this. Just go ahead and order it." And it took care of it. And I was sort of blown away. Now, this might sound really simple, but for a system like this is a non-trivial use case. And it's something that I thought was a total edge case, and I was an outlier. And apparently I wasn't because their system was able to handle it very, very well. And this was all several years ago, that I had this interaction. And so, again, this is a really great use case that you don't necessarily need to go to ChatGPT and like ingrain that into a website to have a great experience. There are companies that have been making very sophisticated platforms that have machine learning embedded in them that are chatbots that will capture interactions and they will train themselves over time to become better and better at handling your particular use case. And so that is something that people should absolutely think about is, well, what was there before? And this kind of goes to one of my rules for people looking at AI. If you aren't a company that has software developers that are today doing machine learning, your starting place should be to go and talk to your existing vendors and find out what they're doing. And what you need to go to them with is not, are you using AI? Because the answer will most likely be yes, and they will try and sell you on something you probably don't need. Instead, you need to go to your vendors and you need to say, we're trying to now solve these problems, and we suspect that you guys might be working on something that has some machine learning or AI in it that could apply to this. Can you please tell us what you have? And if their answer isn't like, oh yeah, we solved that problem, then move on and go look for some other vendors. Um, because that's really how most companies should be adopting these technologies, is through the tool sets that they already have. It's just a much easier way to adopt them.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think, the more that I see companies that are adopting machine learning and things, and machine learning is a term that's been around for a very long time. But I
Yeah.
think the key here is that the tool sets to be able to implement it into a business are just much more accessible these days than they've ever been before.
Yeah.
Before, I mean, you used to have a room of data scientists and all these things,
Yeah.
to be able to even start to explore that. And now there's lots of off the shelf and other types of libraries and different things that can be used to start to prototype these things in a way where it doesn't cost you multi millions of dollars to start deploying and testing these sorts of solutions. But to your point, don't do it unless you already maybe have an opportunity, a repeatable process that is measured, that you could try to automate more so. And I think that's the key word is just like you
Yeah.
said, let's stop using the term AI. Let's start using
Yeah.
the terms like automation and machine learning versus
Yeah, I think
artificial
the
intelligence.
activity the activity that we should be thinking about is training. So, that's what a machine learning system is. That's what all of these language models are. What they're actually building is a system that will, so, like, to do any of these large language models, the Google model, Gemini or Gamma or whatever it is, ChatGPT, any of the things that Microsoft is working on separate from OpenAI, all of those start with training. And today what that means is they are taking, over a trillion documents, um, off of the internet and from licensed sources and things, and they are coming up with very sophisticated ways of segmenting and annotating and tagging that data, and then they're feeding it through a machine learning system, so that machine is training itself. So as that content passes through, that's what's being trained, and then what comes out the other side then is a model. And that model is what we all interact with when we're using these chatbots. So if you're looking at doing something, a good way to look at this is to say, what's the data that I have that I would use to train a person to do this exact thing? If we go to manufacturing, that's a really great place to think about this. The rule, and there's lots of ways to automate, um, systems, whether it's material handling or even fabrication. We've had robots in factories so long that we don't even think of them as robots anymore. It's just a tool, right? A CNC punch or a CNC mill or whatever, right? We're now getting into cobots and things that are much, much easier to program to do things, right? So like there's currently this little revolution going on there, maybe not so little, but at the end of the day, the rule in that environment where all of that cool new robotics and machine learning is really being applied in some pretty fast ways, the rule there is you've got to perfect it with people first. You just have to. And so and the reason is just the cost of deploying a system, you're not gonna get any return on it if you just try and do everything with robots before you've really figured out how to do it. People are just infinitely more flexible. So, apply this back into whatever your use case is for your business. What's the actual data that you would use to teach a person about this? And then what are the, how many facts do you have? You can make machine learning things now with some of the systems on very, very tiny data sets, like, maybe a few dozen documents, like really small. Like they have things where you can like load a PDF in and then interact with the PDF. Stuff like that. Those are really interesting kind of use cases. So you don't need big data anymore. And that's just because we've learned how to build these training systems a lot better. But again, how would we train a human is like a really good starting point, because if you kind of come to the conclusion like, well, I don't really have data that I would show to somebody. Okay, well, then you've just answered the question. Like, there's not really a way of automating that. Now, I can give you a use case though, where the opposite is true. And this is sort of an interesting one of the areas where you can apply machine learning systems to business, maybe quite easily. So there's a class of system you've probably heard of called like a machine vision system, right? It's exactly what you think it is. It's a camera, and it's connected to some machine learning system that is now taking all that input. And it's maybe not just a camera like we would use. Maybe it's an infrared camera, or maybe it's a LiDAR sensor, but it's something that can look at something and can take the data and interpret it in a particular way. So here's the interesting use case for this. Instead of being a part of your business where you have some information from a repeating process that you have, and you're going to now take action on that data, this is the case where you're going to use the system itself to create the data. It is going to create a fact or a set of facts for you. And the outcome from that then is now you can either use a conventional system or you can use another machine learning system to act on those facts. So here's a couple of use cases around machine learning. So there's a really interesting company, and the name is escaping me right now, but they've got some demos up of their machine vision system. And they will take a camera and they will put it in a space between two animal pens, and a herd of sheep will move through these pens. And their system can identify each individual sheep. And the system's been trained that they will count the sheep when they move from one boundary to another boundary. So if they turn around and go back, it doesn't count it, right? It's clever in a couple of different ways. This fits a couple of criteria that are really important. It is observing something that matters. The outcome of that observation matters deeply to the business. We don't want to lose any livestock. They can measure like cows and sheep and chickens and presumably people, but they can count them very rapidly. It is not practical for a person to do that. It is a human doing it isn't going to be accurate or reliable doing it in this way where the whole herd goes by and we count them all. Instead, we have to change the process where we channel the livestock through something where it's one at a time and we can kind of click something and we can do it. By switching to this system, you have something that is infinitely more reliable and potentially also much safer, in that people don't need to be necessarily next to or near a situation. So this presents a really interesting use case for where a machine vision system can now observe something and create a fact. There were 300 sheep that went by. Great. The sheep come back out. Were there still 300? No. Okay, now you can have any kind of system go, you know what? The number went from 300 to not 300. I probably need to take some action. Maybe I need to let someone know, or I need to send a text message to whoever's on duty, or I need to do something because for our business, it matters that we don't lose any animals, right? It's a very simple use case, but in this particular case, we are creating facts from some sort of observation. And that's a really interesting use case. Now, we can apply that to other business needs as well. So, for instance, in food preparation, if you are the owner of multiple franchises, you probably care very deeply that your customers are receiving high quality food. I think it's just sort of a given. And it's really hard to have a situation where everybody has to agree what quality is. Everybody has to also care and be incentivized in the right way. So, a really simple example of this is you can actually put a camera right above like a food prep station, and let's say they're making a pizza. It would be very easy for one of these systems to like count, to tell, did you get enough cheese on it? Because it can see, there's sauce showing through, or did you get enough pepperoni on? And this is an actual example that they have, but it's also a little bit contrived because, there's lots of kinds of pizza. But the idea is you can make sure that at that step, it was a quality pizza. And then you put it in the oven and you could test it again. Like, does it look like it was cooked properly? And now you've got a system that isn't a person who's like getting paid to like get the pizzas out the door, right? But you've got a system that is now working with that person who is like working hard to get the pizzas done and get them out the door, that can basically do something simple like green light, pizza looks good, move it to the next step, right? And it can be in a place where we don't want more people in a kitchen where food's being prepared, right? And so it's an interesting use case. It may be a little bit of a simple one, but again, it's the kind of thing where anything that matters to your business that can be observed, a machine vision system is a way to create facts then that allow you to build something like a KPI to understand like quality or to understand. Another great use case is a safety use case. It's easy to put cameras up that like in every factory that I go to, you need to wear PPE. You're gonna have to wear steel toe boots or a helmet or ear protection or eye protection or whatever the case is. So let's just say you're in a particular area, you need to have goggles on. One of the things that I see plant managers and operations leaders saying all the time is it's everyone's job to help everyone be safe. This is just another way of doing that. You can easily train one of these systems to observe that's a human being. Great. Do they have safety equipment on? No. Go ahead and take an action. And the action may simply be just like I recorded it. It didn't look like I'm going to save this clip of this person and I'm going to record it. And now you have a quality person or a safety person whose job it is to look at all those incidents and say, "Oh yeah, we didn't actually meet our own goals for safety." And we can now take a remediative action. Or maybe it's something that happens in real time, which sort of makes the most sense, right? Like
Sure.
set off the flashing red light, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot my eyeglasses," right? It's just the things that in environments where we do lots of repetitive tasks or things over and over again, it's very easy to become complacent because you just forget. And so this is just that gentle reminder, and in this case, it's like a little safety co-pilot for anyone working there. It's not a big brother situation where we're, like, watching what you're doing. This is for you because
Yeah.
safety is absolutely critical, right? So that's another example where you can take a machine learning system, if you remove the AI moniker and make it seem like some big giant thing, now it's a really practical tool that you can understand how this could get incorporated into something that you're doing.
That's fantastic. Well, Grant, I could talk to you all day, and we're going to come back and we're going to do more of this. So, if I want to get in touch with you, Grant, and I want to learn more about the work you're doing, if I want to have you come and help me out with some of these opportunities, let's say, that I might have in my business, how do I get in touch?
I think the easiest way is you can Google or you can LinkedIn, just search for Grant Wood Innovation, and I'll be one of the top 3 hits on there. Or you can go to notionlabs.com, which is our company, and Notion is spelled with a K, like knowledge or knee. And Notion Labs is where you can learn about some of the things that we do with people for concept development and pipeline management. So, yeah, that's the best way.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Grant.
You bet, Kurt. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join me. I mean, it's just, I learned so much every time I talk to Grant, and I hope you did too. Make sure that you don't get too afraid of AI because it's not necessarily coming for your job, but you should understand it. So watch because we're going to have more episodes where we're going to be talking about this subject and give you all the info that I think that you need to be successful. Have a great rest of your week.